Hello and welcome to Just Onside. It's Monday. It's 5:30 in the UK. In Blackburn, it's absolutely freezing. Hence the scarf. So I presume it's 9:30 where you are, OS.
It is indeed, as you can see from the lights or lack of light outside. Yeah, pretty late, but here we are on a Monday night, ready to talk all things relegation. Doing well, thank you. Ayub, how are you, George?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on again for our regular dose of delusion.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Although as the games keep ticking along, George, even you must be now slightly coming around to your potentially inevitable fate.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
We'll get
Lead
there.
us.
We'll get there.
Good. How are you? Ayub? Still top of the table, right?
Top of the table, yeah, it's been fantastic for the last, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days. And we had a nice little result on, when was it? A few days ago. Wales, 3 players from Leeds. So I'm back in Wales at the moment. So I'm a honorary Welshman as well at the moment. So all things are good. But the nerves are beginning to kick in because we're playing on Friday. Massive game against Watford. And it's set in such a way, it's set up beautifully because I think Leicester play first, Southampton play at 3 o'clock, Blackburn play Ipswich at 5:30, and we play right at the end. So we'll know exactly what the situation is. But to be honest, it's must win. Every single game is a must win at this moment in time. So all good, all good. But I'm coming down with something, little tickle in the throat at the moment. So I think maybe in a couple of days I might have a cold. So I might be off work for a few days.
He's already getting him in early.
But as you can sort of see, it's normally me and OS on the show, but it's we've got our dear friend George, but we've brought him on for a reason. He's a little bit excited. And I'm sure he's going to explain exactly why. But before we do that, let me ask for the usual good stuff. Smash a like, subscribe if you haven't and you're watching this and thinking, hang on, what the hell's this show all about? So subscribe if you haven't, share with your friends, do all the good stuff. Okay, so let's crack on with the show. Right. George, we've asked you on, but before you go, I'm going to ask Owen to briefly explain about financial fair play because it's far too complex for a small brain like mine. So just give us an insight into what this financial fair play is all about.
Yeah, I mean, we've been through it at length, Ayub, in some of the previous episodes. So I won't labour the point. But essentially, it would appear the Premier League, recently at least anyway, have been coming down quite hard, haven't they, on some of the clubs with regards to potential breaches. Obviously, Manchester City currently have 115 Premier League breaches hanging over their heads. No doubt that will be heard at some point, it would appear.
In about 10 years' time, it appears.
Correct. But
everybody else seems to have points deducted apart from them.
Well, I think Premier League Supremo Richard Masters, if you remember, was hauled in front of the Parliamentary Committee, and he spoke about how we couldn't share when that case would be heard, but that it would be heard. Most observers believe that it is being heard in the next 6 to 9 months. Let's see when that comes to fruition. Obviously, currently there's a lot of rumours about Chelsea. No doubt that's coming down the pike as well. I think that one will also be a case that Chelsea will have to kind of bear. And if you listen to a lot of experts, Ayub and George, about that particular situation, a lot of people expect Chelsea to also be punished fairly severely as well. So currently what has been proven out, obviously you've had the Everton deduction for falling foul of the profit and sustainability rules. Essentially, in a long-winded way, you've got a certain amount that you can spend and be permitted to lose over a period of time, over a rolling period of time. The Premier League have a certain set of rules. UEFA has a different set of rules with regards to clubs competing in European competition. And it would appear that Everton it was proven that Everton fell foul of those breaches, were punished initially 10 points, if you'll remember, then I think brought down to 6, wasn't it? I think on appeal. Nottingham Forest, similar situation. They were charged, I think, the best part of a couple of months ago, if you remember, alongside Everton's second charge, which is still yet to be proven out. And Forest have been given, I think, a 4-point deduction, haven't they? Which, again, has probably brought a smile to George's face, but that's essentially, I mean, Nottingham Forest, to be fair, did plead guilty, I believe, very early on and all the rest of it, but even still, they were dealt a 4-point deduction. So yeah, that's essentially what the rules are. Again, it would appear as though these rules have come out of nowhere, but they haven't really. It was just, I think it's just, I want to say somewhat coincidental that it's all come to the fore this season. But I think it's also because you have to have breached a certain permitted losses over a period of time. So that's what it essentially is. It's not just like a 1 year, let's say, falling foul of the rules on one particular year. It's about how much losses you can accrue over a period of 3 years, which George will explain because he's a finance expert anyway. But yeah, that's essentially how it all works. But maybe again, maybe the floor over to George. George, how does that make you feel? Because obviously Forest, rightly or wrongly, have been deducted 4 points. Everton might be facing a second charge as well. From your side of things, from a Burnley perspective, as the game's now, I mean, we've come to the latter part of the season. Does this give any hope to Burnley? Do you think they've got any chance to get out of this?
Tiny bit. It's like I said, it's a bit frustrating as well because I'd sort of made my peace with the whole getting relegated scenario. So now this comes along and gives you a tiny glimmer of hope. Just leave us alone. Just let us admit that we're going down, and then we can all move on to next season. But yeah, it's good. It's good to have a little bit of hope. It's completely in our hands. We play Nottingham Forest at home last game of the season, so that could end up being huge. Burnley might well be down by that stage, but you'd like to think the way things are going, that someone is going to have to win that game to stay up, whether Burnley are already down. Forest have to beat us away from home. It's looking to be huge.
I mean, it was a massive week. I mean, we talked about it in the office, George. It was a huge week. So you had the 4-point deduction for Forest. I think Forest played Luton, and I think Forest equalised quite late on in the game, which almost it was the perfect scenario. So it's 5 points between you and safety, and I think really, I mean, offline always sort of said that really it's 6 points because of goal difference. So technically, it is
about
2.
15.
But you've talked about the run of games. I mean, you've said this many, many times before. We sort of, myself and always joked about it that you
I saw it.
So you tell me, because I've looked at the fixtures and I've thought, well, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that you could pick up maybe potentially about sort of 3 wins. And when you're at the bottom, that's huge. Well, I think George will probably sort of explain to us where he thinks the wins are coming from. So go on, George. Next 5 games, apart from, I think you've got Chelsea as well. What do you see? Just go through some of the games that you've got and where you potentially think you're going to pick up maybe 3 points in the game.
Well, next game is away at Chelsea, which is we're either going to get absolutely thumped or we're going to get something out of the game. I can't see it being any other way because I think you spoke about Chelsea last episode, it might have been. The fans, it seems like they're on a knife edge there. So I feel like if we could maybe try and nick a goal, something could go like really wrong with the fans there. But that for me, that's a bit of a throwaway game. You just try and keep a bit of momentum from the Brentford game, carry it through that. Because then the game after that, we've got Wolves at home. And then I think it's Everton away after that, then Brighton at home, then Sheffield United away. So there's some tidy little fixtures in there. That the way we've played this season hasn't filled me with confidence because we've got some very basic things wrong. But anything can happen. Anyone can string a couple of wins together. So yeah, it's a good little run of fixtures to maybe try and have a bit of hope that we could get something. Not saying we will, but yeah.
But it's got to be used as a catalyst now in terms of what's happened. I mean, this is a lifeline. It really was. I mean, you were dead and buried, or at least it seemed you were dead and buried. It's almost a godsend that this opportunity has presented itself. Now, potentially Everton. I mean, always talked about it, that there is still a case to answer for Everton. So there could be a further points deduction. So, but certainly now, looking at the table, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Burnley can escape. So surely now, this is, if ever there was a time for Company to earn his crust, surely it's got to be now.
Definitely. And you could sort of see him at the end of the Brentford game. I think he sort of realised that it's a bit flat around Turf Moor. Like, rightly so, because first things first, you've got to give the fans something to cheer about, haven't you? So after the game, you could see, like, I think he realises that this is, if it's ever going to happen, that this is the best chance we've got of turning something around. So you could sort of see him at the end of the game, like really trying to G the fans up, like really showing them that it meant something to him. but then in turn it'll mean something to the fans.
I think.
I mean, so go on, Wes.
I was the problem. I mean, they're just too far adrift. I mean, I'm just going to cut right through it. They're just too far adrift. I mean, too many games. I mean, when it's early on and it's like 4 points, 5 points. I mean, they've been further adrift in the early part of the season. But you always felt that you still have games to recover, right? Back-to-back wins or something or the other. And they've had a bit of fortune, let's be honest, in terms of it's been an unusual season in terms of two of its nearest competitors falling foul of the rules and having points deducted, maybe another further points deduction to come. So they've been fortunate in that respect. I think the story here, to be honestly, isn't Burnley. And I'll stick with Burnley for the time being, but it's really Luton. Because at the 29-game mark currently, they're in with a realistic shot of staying up. And nobody would have thought that at the start of the season because they were
especially me, yeah.
Especially you. So I mean, especially in terms of what Luton Town represent in terms of their kind of competing in the league, but also obviously what happened with Tom Lockyer and everything. So it's been an incredible season for them for all different types of reasons. And yet here we are at the last international break of the season, and Luton Town are currently outside of the relegation zone, hook or by crook through points deductions or whatever it may be. So they really are, for me, the story from a Burnley perspective. I mean, George is right. If they can get something out of this next game, it's an unusual game to call. To your point, you could either get thumped or maybe stay in the game. The fans get restless, as they have been getting on the manager's back. They've got relatively speaking, I emphasize, relatively speaking, a decent run of games there afterwards. They could lose all of them as well, to be fair, but they are the kind of games just before they maybe go to Old Trafford, I think it is, George, where you think if you're going to get something, it needs to be then. I mean, they could be relegated by the time they go to Old Trafford if they've not picked up some points. So I think they would hope that, look, get a point at Stamford Bridge somehow, some way. I can't see it, but I think there's some games there afterwards which they'll think, Wolves, Newcastle, just as Sheffield United, I believe, where they'll think that's where we're gonna, and they're gonna have to your point, you get some back-to-back wins or something, because now it's not a case of let's build some momentum. They've got to somehow find a way to find 6 points. I mean, it's six points is a lot of points when based on your average currently accrued so far, they're only likely to get to 22, and 22 is not going to be enough. So they need to find a way to put something together to just have a bit of a miracle run and somehow get themselves out of this. Like I said, it's not the Everton points deductions that's going to be their savior. It's going to be themselves trying to dig themselves out of it. I think, unfortunately, they are one of the 3 worst clubs you've seen. I mean, they were taking an absolute mauling. That Brentford win was obviously huge, and just as well because obviously Brentford are down to 10 men. But I just think too little, too late, and they've just not quite consistently had the quality. That doesn't mean they're done and dusted, because there's still games to play, and you can still earn your crust, as you put it, for Vincent Kompany. I just think there's also a talent discrepancy here as well. And I think Sheffield United and Burnley, unfortunately, have been found wanting in terms of at this level. Again, they've got time to rectify the situation, but I anticipate it's going to be a bit more of the same, unfortunately.
I'm actually quite optimistic, strangely enough, for Burnley, because I don't know. Sometimes I look at omens and I just sort of think, are you getting the rub of the green? And the reason why I say that is, obviously the major one is the 4-point deduction for Forest. The result against Brentford as well, they got a man sent off, and things were just sort of falling into place. I mean, it was squeaky bum time right at the end, George, as is always the one with Burnley. But also there was another result which I'll look back on, or it may be something that Luton may look back on and think maybe this was the game that perhaps tilted it the other side for us. It was the Bournemouth game when they were winning 3-0 and they got and they ended up getting beat 4-3. A huge result from, I mean, at the bottom, a point is gold dust. 3 point is just, I mean, it's manna from heaven. So for them to sort of have that result, it's a huge psychological blow. I just sort of think there is a chance, but it has to be now where I'm really looking at Kompany. I'm looking at the players as well, but I'm looking at Kompany more than anything to see, right, has he got something now? It's almost as if it's a stay of execution. I think the hangman's noose was tight around the neck. Suddenly it's loose. Let's see what they can do. I hope at least they put up a fight. I hope they put up a real good fight to sort of say, right, we've got this opportunity. Let's see what we can do. But I think there's a glimmer of hope. I think there is a chink of light. I'm just intrigued to find out how they perform. And even with the Chelsea game, I would be, and I've said to you many times before that I've never been an advocate of it's a free hit. Whatever happens, happens. No, even if you're playing the best side in the world, if you're in the same league, you go in there to try and get a result. And that has to be the attitude. There has to be the mindset that, right, doesn't matter, it's Chelsea. In fact, it's even better that it's Chelsea because they're indifferent. You never know which Chelsea is rocking up. So in a sense, it should give you a little bit of a lift as well. So if I was a Burnley fan, I'd be slightly optimistic. I mean, it is backs against the wall at the moment in time, but certainly the last few weeks should have given Burnley and the whole football club and the whole town a little glimmer of hope.
Well, but just back to Bursa's point as well about Luton, like, yeah, take absolutely nothing away from Luton. It's brilliant what they're doing, and they very well could stay up. But back to the Everton, if Everton get docked, I think they might get docked another 2 points. That happens, they come down to 23 points, a point in front of Luton, and all of a sudden you're not just chasing Luton. There's 2 spaces there up for grabs. So it's not, yeah, it's
a tough one, that isn't it?
I know it is some buts, but
yeah, I mean that's the thing. But also we talked about, I know you can maybe offer your thoughts on this as well. That Forest are appealing, and we know what happened when Everton appealed. From 10 points, it became 6 points. Now the appeals will be answered after the season has finished, and we've talked about this. That it really is. It's gonna. It almost is impossible to imagine what would happen if after the season the appeals Forest appeal and it's overturned and they that 4 point deduction becomes, let's say, a 1 point deduction. How the hell can people process this? Because you're either down or you're staying in the Premier League. You can't sort of 2 months later be relegated, because it's going to have the ramifications it's as I said, I can't even imagine what the conversations will be. So what's your thoughts on that?
I think just very quickly, the one thing I would say about Everton and Forest is that I still think from a Burnley perspective, it's somewhat of a moot point, in the sense that, let's say Forest, I mean, if Everton get dragged into it, depending on, let's say, if it's a 2 point deduction, George, as to your point, Burnley still need to find 6 points from somewhere. And the other thing with Forest is, to your point, if they do, let's say, they do appeal, and that 4 points is, let's say, improved to 2 points. Again, from a Burnley perspective, they still need to find these 6 points. And the worry I have is the games are ticking by. It's far more likely that over the next 2-3 games, they'll find themselves, I won't say adrift, but to the point where you're thinking, well, the fat lady's warming up her vocal cords, as they say. I think that's what you're probably going to find, just because I think there's just been a distinct lack of quality, consistent quality. It's not that they've not pulled a result out here and there. You did mention about Luton game against Bournemouth. You're right. I mean, if that went Luton's way, then that probably would have been good night, God bless. But I think from a Burnley perspective, I just think it's a little too late. I think they're just still a little too far away. If it was, let's say, 3, maybe 4, but I think 6 is just a lot of points for that team to recover. I think, again, interesting to see if Luton can somehow take it to the final 2 or 3 games. And then maybe, who knows, if Everton are deducted some points, maybe there's a little bit of anxiety that creeps in. Yes, they've been there, done it. They've probably got the manager for that type of situation anyway. But it'll just be interesting to see how it shakes out. Just going back to Burnley, George, from your perspective, Ayub was hinting at it. I could tell he wanted to go in a bit stronger. But in terms of the manager, do you, in some way, how culpable do you hold him in terms of this season so far? It seems that you may, end up with quite a lowly total, potentially, I say. How culpable do you hold him? Of course, there's always some level of accountability. But if it did come to it and you were relegated and you went back to the Championship, are you keen for him to stick around and get you back up at the first time of asking?
Yeah, 100%. I've said it all along. I wouldn't sack him because I don't think, especially in this position we're at now, you're not getting anybody better than him to get us back up. And if you remember, probably pushing about 10 years ago now, we did exactly the same thing with Sean Dyche. We came up when it wasn't really in the plan to come up. We absolutely underperformed. We got sent straight back down. We kept with Dyche, and then we went back up the next season, and we spent the next 7 seasons in the Premier League. So when Company first came in, it was a 2 to 3 year plan, as they said. The plan was never to go up last season. It was always to build up towards going up within 2 to 3 years. So I don't see why we should interrupt that plan. Albeit, yes, he has to take accountability this season, because I think the squad selection and the transfers we've made haven't been good enough for the money that he's spent. Nowhere near good enough defensively. The James Trafford is absolutely nowhere near Premier League quality at the minute. Not saying he won't be, but you can just see it around the ground. We started Muric in it for the first time against Brentford, and he pulled off some worldly saves, and you can tell everybody is just a lot more confident. The fans are more confident with him in that.
Just on James Trafford, George, just before you chime in, because I know you're quite tough on your managers, you obviously would have expected Burnley in around March time to be top of the table at you, but otherwise you sack the manager. So I know you obviously that would be your expectation.
Yeah.
But George, just very quickly on James Trafford, just because you mentioned him, is it a simple case of, I don't want to just minimize it to this because I think you've watched him a lot more closely than I have. I've watched him in the televised games closely. Yes, in the middle, he went through that difficult period of the whole kind of coming out for crosses, getting impeded, and then teams, as you expect, at the highest level start to play on that a lot more. You saw that when Arsenal came to town at Turf Moor as well. But just very quickly, is it simply just a case with him, bought for decent money, obviously from a big club, after the triumph in the European Championships? Is it just a simple case of more game time, but also just needs to bulk up a little bit? What's your thoughts?
I think it's just too soon for him. I think because he'd only, obviously, yes, he played under 21 championships and they won that. But apart from that, he'd only ever played League One football before. So you've thrown him in at the deep end. He's had some good games, to be fair to him. Brighton away was absolutely stellar. It was brilliant. But he's far too... He does get bullied. He gets bullied, and his decision making's not there. And I think just all round at the moment, Muric is a better goalkeeper. I think the talent's there for Trafford, but I think it's just a step too far too soon for him.
I think from my perspective, when I see James Trafford, it reminds me a little. I shouldn't maybe make this comparison, but I just remember when De Gea came to this league.
Exactly.
He was struggling with all sorts. Famously, obviously, Andy Carroll and. With a goalkeeper, there's so much. I feel like it's so much between the years, and you're right in terms of George. Like, he's just too young, right? So you don't know what you don't know. You're thrust in at the deep end, Premier League. You're playing for obviously a fairly average club, so you're always going to be under the pump, home and away. Let's be very clear. Corners, set pieces, and as soon as teams, you know this with the analytics and with the data now, once they think there's a weakness there, they're all playing on it. There's got like 2 or 3 players surrounding him, not even allowing him to move. He's made some poor decisions. We're going to cut him some slack because he's a young lad. I think maybe over time, a bit more stature, a bit more game time, maybe another season with Burnley and the Championship comes back up. I think you may get to see perhaps a future England number 1. Who knows? Because this is how a lot of these stories start in some regards. I think it's just one of those where he has to probably stick with it, stay with it, hopefully have a coach that gives him some faith, shows him some faith, I should say. But yeah, definitely been found wanting in some aspects of the goalkeeping, but you can't be too harsh just because, again, he just needs games. I think he just needs games, and I think his body will fill out a little bit more over time. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But just to put a bow on it, Ayub, I think Burnley are done for. Unfortunately, I just think it's too many points to catch. What's your thoughts, Ayub? No doubt you want to chime in on Vincent Kompany.
I do. I think it's too late now in terms of they should have. I think he should have been removed from his position. I think he was. Certainly from my point of view. Now, obviously, George, you're a Burnley fan, so you've got a much more astute understanding of exactly how he's performed. But for me, I think he was too arrogant. I think he was far too arrogant. I think he was just so dogmatic in his approach. He kept this right. This is the way that we're going to play the championship. I mean, the championship and the Premier League. I mean, it's the gulf is so huge, so vast that you've got to be practical. if you want to stay in the Premier League, there has to be an element of practicality. And I think he was just too arrogant. I think he believed his own hype. But if you were going to get rid of him, you had to get rid of him a little while ago. Now you can't, because in a sense, he's the best equipped manager for the Championship, because he's obviously got you from the Championship to the Premier League. Now, I hope that if you do go down and when you come back up, because I think you will do, if you go down, you're going to come straight back up. But I hope he has the humility to be different the next time that he's in the Premier League, because I think he's approached it awfully. I think the recruitment, you've alluded to it, I think it's been absolutely horrific. And you cannot have an inexperienced keeper if you know you're going to be flirting with relegation. You can't. I mean, I wish you made the point that if you're playing for a team that's at the bottom, you are going to be constantly under pressure. You have to have experience. It's the toughest, in a sense, it's the toughest position for a poor team, the keeper, because that's where it's going to be the most demanding. You've got somebody, like you said, playing in League One. He's had some experience, obviously, of international football, but that's at a junior level. He was always going to be under pressure. And I was similarly thinking of De Gea as well. He had a torrid start, but he went on to be one of the best keepers in the world. But I just think that playing for Manchester United, playing for Burnley, it's different. You're probably not going to be as much under pressure playing for Man United, albeit I suppose now it's a different story. But I just think that everything, or a lot of things at Burnley went wrong, and I hold Vincent Kompany culpable, because ultimately he's putting out the team on the field. He's had many a bad result. We've spoken many times, George.
Finish your point. Finish your point.
No. But for me, I think he's been woeful. I think he's been absolutely shocking, and I think it's primarily based on. I think he had such a wonderful run in the Championship. He really started believing the hype, and I think he needed to step back after the first few weeks and think, hang on, maybe this is not going the way that I expect. Do I need to change a little bit? I mean, that's my thoughts. George is a Burnley fan. What's your thoughts?
No, I agree with your point. There's a lot of Burnley fans that have that point of view as well. Don't get me wrong. It's yeah, it just seems like it's too late in the day. I say I have optimism that there's a glimmer of hope that we can stay up. Doesn't by all means say yes, we are staying up. But there's a chance there, but I agree with you. I think it's too late, and we've no one to blame but ourselves. It's the squad needed tweaking about half a season ago because it wasn't working. Everybody could see it weren't working, and just no changes came.
Yeah.
Bit unlucky. We're a bit unlucky with injuries, etc. But those excuses only carry so far. It's ultimately it boils down to what you see on the pitch, and it's not been good enough for a while.
I think the issue Burnley had, honestly, I'm a little different in that maybe this is too simplistic, but 3 teams have to go down, right? So there's never been a Premier League where teams haven't got relegated, and Burnley, by virtue of being, no doubt they won the Championship at Cantor last season. And no doubt they would have wanted to make a much better fist of it than they currently have, albeit there's still some time left. I still think they would have been one of the favourites to go down. And I just think if you look at the squad makeup that they got promoted with, George, again, you're better equipped to speak about it than I am, but players on loan, young players, and all the rest of it, it was always going to be a slightly difficult transition, in a sense, to take that kind of relatively young team and make them competitive in the Premier League at the first time of asking, unless you change the entire makeup of the first team squad. So I just think that also you can't do over one particular window or 2 windows, to be honest. So I think, whereas I think what served them well in the Championship was perhaps equally, in a sense, to their detriment when it came to the Premier League, where you do for sure need some mix of experience and quality. And look, ultimately, there's a reason why the 3 promoted clubs are always the favourites to go down. And I think most people would still think Forest will find a way, and Luton will probably find themselves back in that relegation zone. So the 3 promoted clubs will probably go down. So I just think, and if it wasn't for Nottingham Forest's points deduction, then Luton would look a lot more likely, let's say, than they currently are, where they still have a fighting chance. So I'm a bit more relaxed about Vincent Kompany. I just think these are some of the lumps you have to go through as a young manager with a young team. Burnley are not mainstays of the Premier League, albeit obviously they were in previous times. I just think this iteration of the Burnley team is, to what George alluded to earlier, not quite got the quality. Could they have changed things in January? It's a difficult one, isn't it? Are you going to pump a whole bunch of money and then find yourself still getting relegated, and then you're having to move around salaries, and that also leaves the squad a bit imbalanced. So I think they're probably thinking, look, we've got what we've got. If we go down, you're going to go down, similar to what you spoke about you with Luton at the start of the season, and maybe they are better equipped maybe to come back next time. I mean, look, yeah, someone has to get relegated, and unfortunately, that's the name of the game.
Let me just make another point, and I'll open it to the floor so you can both offer your thoughts on this. Now, normally, promotion is it's a 46 game season in the Championship. It's a long, arduous season, and usually maybe it's towards 43 game 43, game 44 that you can sort of say, right, we're promoted. Burnley were. I mean, it was February, March. By the time that they'd got promoted. So it was an exceptional situation for Burnley because you almost had ample time to prepare for the Premier League, which is unusual because normally you wait until the game week 43, 44, 45. In this case, in this season, I reckon it's going to be the last game of the season. Burnley had all the time in the world to prepare for the Premier League, which is why it's even more disappointing because it really, it's everything that Burnley have done in terms of acquisitions, in terms of the way that Vincent Kompany has approached the season. It's almost as if it was last minute. Everything was rushed. Everything was last minute. It really, and that's why I'm not a Burnley fan, but that's why I'll be even more frustrated that you had more time than any of the other clubs to prepare yourself for life in the Premier League, knowing full well Kompany's played in the Premier League. He knows exactly what it takes, albeit he's been a stellar player playing for the top teams. He's not really been involved in relegation battles, but he should have been aware of what it takes. I think it's been an enormous failure on the part of Burnley as a football club. And really, I think they should have, of all the clubs that came up, they should have been better prepared, better equipped than any other club. And that's why I think it should be even more of a frustration. What's your thoughts? Do you think that they had enough time to prepare and they failed miserably?
No, we did, and even to this day, I think I said it when I was on a couple of episodes back. I'm not sure which one, but it made absolutely no sense to me why we didn't sign the three lads that we had on loan last season. Well, we signed one of them, who was Jordan Baker, but we had Nathan Teller, Taylor Howard-Bellis, and Ian Matson. And Teller, 20 league goals, playing at Bayern Leverkusen now. You've got Taylor Howard-Bellis at Southampton now, who are fighting to come up anyway. And you've got Ian Matson at Dortmund playing Champions League football. I just don't understand what the thought process was behind not signing them. Because like you said, we absolutely dominated that league. So for me, the first thing you do is you keep that team together. Unless the parent club has turned around and say, under no circumstances you having this player because we want them back.
Yeah, we discussed last time, didn't we, about Taylor Howard-Bellis? I think, wasn't there a connection with the Man City Supremo who'd taken over like the Southampton recruitment or something or the other? So there was some connection there. You've got to question also a player who's willing to get promoted with a Championship club and then head straight back to the Championship.
But the bid never went in. To my knowledge, the bid never ever even went in for Howard-Bellis. It's crazy.
Fair, but I think at the time there was also other clubs linked, weren't there? I think Fulham, West Ham, just to name a few, if memory serves. So I just think I think there's something more to that story that meets the eye when a player who works hard lifts the trophy in the summer with his national team, then huge rave reviews, definitely would have walked into one of the teams, albeit in the bottom half of the table, no doubt. Then decides, you know what I really want to do? I want to spend another season in Championship. And maybe that's to his credit in terms of the long-term prospects of him in terms of, games and experience and all the rest of it. All for it, no issues whatsoever. Clearly he thinks he wasn't ready for the Premier League. So I just think there's something more to that. If not Burnley, another club. But the fact the player ended up going back to the Championship, a level below, tells me a little bit that there was some undercurrent to that situation, whatever it may be. I just think you speak about a lack of preparation at Ayub. I mean, they were one of the first clubs, if not setting records in terms of coming back for pre-season. When I think the Premiership had just ended and they started already calling players back for pre-season training. I genuinely don't think it's arrogance. I still think it's a manager learning. You don't know what you don't know. So I think as a manager, you're learning, you're finding more of understanding more about yourself, about the job, about the players, about the squad, the staff, all the rest of it. I just think this is something that if they hopefully stick with him, let's see if he wants to stick with Burnley. I think you just have to go through these lumps sometimes. I think you can't say, oh, we should have stayed up because we should have done more. Fine, you might stay up for this season, or like it's like Luton Town. I'll finish off on this point. Let's say they do somehow, by the miracle of all miracles, survive Premier League status. Amazing story. Will be spoken about for years, but they'll be starting as absolute dead certs to go down next year, and it's just the way it is. There are some clubs, just because of the makeup of the team, the squad, whatever it may be, the stature of the club, that'll be favourites. I think Burnley, unfortunately, haven't quite established themselves to the extent Ayub, that they should stabilise themselves in mid-table, as you might want them to.
Right. Well, George, we'll give you. We're coming to wrap up the show, but we'll obviously, as the Burnley fan, I'll give you the floor. Just do deep down, hand on your heart. Do you think there is an opportunity? Bearing in mind, obviously, you've had a good couple of weeks.
This is going to be a short answer.
Yeah, no, it's one of those. It's that old adage, isn't it? My head says no, but my heart says yes. So we'll say no. I think it's too late. I've said it for a while now. It's too late.
Yeah, I think it's
But,
done and done.
it's not going to stop me hoping that it doesn't. But yeah, I think it's too late.
I just think if they had a bit more about them in terms of I always think when it's a team fighting relegation, unless you've got some decent experience in the squad, it only actually gets worse. It tends to peter out because, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, let's see, but it's just because the pressure becomes a lot. It's very suffocating in terms of the fans get restless, away crowds, you lose a goal early, you start to feel sorry for yourself. I think that whole experience of feeling going down the stretch when games get big. I mean, you think the games are going to be big at the top end of the table, they're equally as big at the bottom end of the table. I just think that pressure just becomes you're a lot less energetic, let's say, or more gathered to get a result than you are, let's say, at the early part of the season when there's a lot of hope and optimism around. So I just think, if anything, there's a greater chance that it'll just peter out, unfortunately. Similar to kind of how it has for Sheffield United to some extent, where they've been well relegated, haven't they, to be honest with you. I think Burnley just probably find themselves in that class. So I think they'll probably, unfortunately, meet their fate sooner rather than later. Having said that, they are fortunate to get that run of games now, where if they're going to do anything, it's now or never, really.
Absolutely.
One thing for certain, it's going to be an absolute cracker of relegation running. Well, both ends of the table, it's going to be a cracking running. Because even if Burnley do go down, you've still got Forest, Luton, Everton, and even Brentford now slugging it out for that bottom place.
Look at you just enjoying the moment, thinking.
No.
Thinking my club's going to be hopefully a part of this next season. And
I hope so. But again, it's you're talking about. I mean, George, you've just alluded to the point that it's a cracking. I mean, just as a football fan, it's fantastic. Obviously, you've got a vested interest. It's always a much more nerve-wracking, but it's a dogfight at the bottom of the table. It's incredible at the top of the table. Same with the Championship. I mean, would you believe it? There could be 4 clubs that can finish on 90+ points, and 2 of them won't go up automatically. At the bottom as well, it's so tidy. It's like it's a cigarette paper's width between so many sides. So it's really, really exciting. I'm slightly more optimistic because I tend to sometimes look at little omens. I look at what's happened in recent weeks, and I genuinely think, well, I don't know, maybe, but I'm just hoping that Burnley, at least I hope it's not for the want of putting in an effort. That's where it would be catastrophic if I was a Burnley fan, that they just shriveled up and died. At least what I would want to see is, right, you've got an opportunity that wasn't present a few weeks ago. At least give it a good go. So I'm sort of thinking that maybe they've got a nice little run of fixtures. I genuinely think there are winnable fixtures. I think at least 3 potentially winnable fixtures in those 5 games that are coming up. So you never know. If they win 3, that's 9 points. So
they've won 4 seasons.
No, come on. It's got to be 3 because we've got Everton, Sheffield United, and Forest. Like, they're down there for a reason. I'm not saying we're going to win them, but you have a chance of winning.
And that's the way it should be. That's the attitude, George. That's the attitude.
Stop it now. Stop it now, because I'm back in my head now. I'm I'm thinking we're a Wolves win away from me charging upstairs saying, yes, come on, it's on, we're staying.
I think you have to. I mean, it has to be. This is what Vincent Kompany has to be saying, that look, it's if we're going to go down, we want to go down sort of all guns blazing. It has to be where you leave nothing on the pitch, and these are winnable games. Exactly what you said, George. These teams, Forest, there's a reason why they're towards the bottom. There's a reason why Everton are towards the bottom, albeit they've had points deducted. So
there's a reason why Burnley are at the bottom as well.
Hang on, oh yeah.
Who'd have thought the day came where Ayubi's arguing that Burnley stay up more than I am?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Are you just a slight segue, because I think we're talking about it, and you need to wrap this up in a minute. But let's say Leeds are fortunate enough to get promoted. Would you fire Daniel Farke in the summer? Because I know what your thoughts are about him competing in the Premier League against the other managers. Or are you going to be kind enough and gracious enough to give him at least until the end of August before you start asking for his head?
If I'm the chairman of Leeds United Football Club, I'd say thank you so much, Daniel, for getting us promoted. See you later. He's a big payout on your bike. No, I absolutely, because he's had spells in the Premier League before. Now he's been found wanting. Now that's my concern, because even in the Championship now, we're top of the table. It's an incredible run. I still have lots of question marks over Daniel Farke. I still say he's not as good a coach as people presume. Just because we're top of the table, that automatically doesn't mean that it's all down to Daniel Farke. The fact that we have very good players, the fact that we have players that are capable of playing in the Premier League is a massive factor. At Norwich, he had, I think he had Pookie Wells. He had about 2 or 3 other really, really good players. Now, that's with Daniel Farke. If you give him a good team in the Championship, it's almost inevitable that he'll do all right. Tactically, there's a lot of times he's been found wanting. He's very
you're top of the league.
No, but again, this is
but
the thing.
Also, it's not like he's inherited the whole 11 that he's going up with. He's signed half of them, so surely there's something there to prove that he knows what he's doing.
I'd like to say that it's all down to Daniel Farke, but I can't because when you have players, match winners in your side, it's inevitable, because in the Championship the quality will tell. I mean, George, last year when you had unbelievably good players playing in the Championship, was it all down to Kompany, or was it?
Yeah, he signed them all in that summer.
Well, there you go. That's Burnley. I'm not doing the same for Farke. I'm not. If he gets us up,
I get it. No, I get it. I get that he's got Somerville. I get that he's got Nonto. I get Rutter and all this. But these old saying, it's strikers win your games, defenders win your titles, and he has completely rebuilt the backside of Leeds. So I don't understand why. He's clearly learning from his mistakes.
Well, I mean,
Norwich were always a side that were good going forward and awful defensively. But
I mean,
George, Leeds will be awful defensively next season. Believe you me.
Okay.
I hope so. I hope so, because that means we're within the Premier League.
Yeah, for sure. And that's like I said, that's nothing to do with Leeds' deficiencies. It's just you're going up like 6 levels. It's not just one league. You're going up multiple levels. And look, Daniel Farke, I mean, you know him, Ayub. He's your manager. I'll let you speak about him, but you are way too harsh on him. It's like every game's like, this is a huge game, and I tell you, I'm expecting Daniel. I want to see what he's made up of, and I'm like, you're on a 12-game winning streak. I mean, like, it's about as good as it gets. And look, it's never just about the manager. It's never just about the players. There's a reason why you need a manager. There's a reason why you need players. It's just a combination of both. And right now, Leeds are the best team in the league, albeit I think they've played. Is it a game extra?
Yeah, more than Leicester. Yeah,
I don't follow the Championship over here in Dubai. But the thing is, I just think if they get up, you should give him a bit of a chance. I agree with you. I think being Leeds, no doubt they will show him the door at some point if it's not going so well. But I think it's a bit tough. You've got to give him the opportunity.
Well, let's get to the Premier League. Let's get to the promised land first. So at the moment, but we've got a massive weekend in the Championship, Good Friday and Easter Monday. So I'm going to be sort of getting nervous as the week sort of progresses. But in terms of today's show, I think we'll call it a day. I'm absolutely starving. We're not too far away from breaking the fast. So I'm going to sort of concentrate on that. But George, as always, it's an absolute pleasure. I hope we have you on really, really soon. I hope we have you on after a 4-game winning run by Burnley. That'd be sensational.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
can have me on when the news breaks that Forest's points have been rescinded at the end of the season and we are actually going down instead of staying up.
I don't think so. I don't think so. All right. And always, as always, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. So thank you so much. And the audience, thank you so much. It's cold, it's wet. I think I need to warm up. So stay warm, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Ta-da now.